Welcome, dear friends. Today I'm going to tell you a twisted tale of love, betrayal, and sweet revenge. Enjoy the story. Natalie Johnson leaned against the cold metal morgue table, absent-mindedly wiping it down with disinfectant. Her coworker Samantha burst through the swinging doors, dark curls bouncing. "Girl, did you hear? Dr. Ethan Callahan is looking for a date to the hospital gala tomorrow night. Rumor has it his gold-digging girlfriend Lila dumped him," Samantha whispered conspiratorially. Natalie's heart skipped a beat at the mention of Ethan's name. Memories of her childhood crush came flooding back, the handsome older boy next door who barely noticed shy, awkward Natalie. But that was a lifetime ago, before her father's death sent her family into a downward spiral, before her mother turned to the bottle for solace. "Ethan would never go for a girl like me," Natalie sighed. "He's successful, sophisticated. I'm just the janitor mopping up dead people's fluids." "Please, that man is so far up his own ass, he's like a pretentious cat chasing his own tail," Samantha scoffed. "You're too good for him anyway." Natalie forced a weak smile, trying to ignore the dull ache in her chest. If only Samantha knew the years she had spent pining for a man who didn't even know she existed. Ethan slammed the phone down, running a hand through his perfectly coiffed chestnut hair in frustration. Unbelievable. Lila, the sexy pharmaceutical rep he'd been dating for months, had backed out as his date for the gala last minute. "Something more important came up," she had purred. "You understand, baby. We'll do something special another time." Bullshit. Ethan knew exactly what, or rather who, had come up. Lila's father, a healthcare industry tycoon who had the power to make or break Ethan's career ambitions. She had just been using Ethan to get Daddy's approval. The realization stung. His intercom crackled to life. "Dr. Callahan, your 2 o'clock is here," his secretary Grace announced. "Give me a minute," he barked, scrolling through his contacts. He needed a date for tomorrow night's stat, preferably someone who would stroke his bruised ego. But as he dialed number after number, he was met with rejection. "A boring hospital event? Thanks, but no thanks." Tiffany, the leggy blonde Pilates instructor, rebuffed him. "I have to wash my hair," Veronica, the sultry real estate agent, claimed. Grace poked her head in, taking in Ethan's distress. "What about that cute janitor who's always making googly eyes at you? Natasha or Natalie or something?" "The cleaning girl?" Ethan sputtered incredulously, but as he considered it more, maybe it wasn't such a bad idea. She'd surely be thrilled just to be asked. And seeing him with such an obviously inferior woman on his arm would only make him look better by comparison. A wolfish grin spread across his face. "Grace, clear my schedule tomorrow night. I believe I'll be attending the gala after all." Natalie's hands shook as she knocked on the door to Dr. Callahan's office. She still couldn't believe she was being summoned by Ethan himself. Her heart raced as his secretary waved her inside. "Natalie, come in," Ethan greeted her smoothly, flashing his trademark megawatt smile. "Have a seat." She perched nervously on the chair opposite his massive mahogany desk, pulse thrumming. He looked like he'd just stepped out of the pages of GQ in his crisp white lab coat and designer suit. "You wanted to see me, Dr. Callahan?" "Please call me Ethan. Listen, I have rather an unusual request." He folded his hands, holding her gaze intently. "I was hoping you would do me the honor of being my date to the hospital gala this Saturday." Natalie blinked, certain she must have misheard. "I'm sorry, what?" "You see, my girlfriend was supposed to accompany me, but we've had a rather unfortunate falling out," Ethan explained, looking pained. "I know it's terribly last minute and highly unorthodox given our working relationship, but I couldn't think of anyone else I would rather have on my arm. You've always struck me as such a sweet, genuine person, Natalie." His blue eyes sparkled at her, and Natalie felt her resolve melting. This had to be a dream. Ethan Callahan, noticing her, asking her out. She knew it was crazy, but her heart wouldn't listen to reason. "I'd be delighted," she breathed, hardly believing the words coming out of her mouth. "Thank you for inviting me." "Wonderful." Ethan flashed her another knee-wobbling smile. "I'll have a car pick you up at 7:30 sharp. And Natalie, wear something pretty." He winked roguishly. Natalie floated out of his office on a cloud of bliss, already mentally rifling through her closet. She couldn't wait to tell her mom and Samantha that she, Natalie Johnson, mop girl extraordinaire, was going to the gala with Dr. Ethan Callahan himself. It was like something out of a fairy tale. Little did she know the harsh reality check in store. Her Prince Charming was about to turn back into a frog. Natalie's footsteps echoed as she pushed her cleaning cart down the deserted hospital hallway. Most of the staff had already left to get ready for tonight's big event. As she neared Ethan's office, she could hear him on the phone, his deep baritone drifting into the corridor. Curiosity got the better of her, and she paused by the door, straining to listen. "I know, it's perfect, right? That homely little mouse who cleans the morgue, she's so pathetically in love with me. She'll cream her granny panties if I deign to take her. Can you imagine what a boost it'll give my reputation when people see how charitable I am?" Ethan's cruel laughter made Natalie's stomach roil with humiliation and rage. How could she have ever thought there was anything decent about this man? "Oh, I'll give her a night she'll never forget, all right. A few drinks, a pity dance, maybe a sympathy grope in the coat room, and she'll be eating out of my hand. Girls like that are so damaged they're grateful for any scrap of attention." Tears pricked Natalie's eyes as she fled down the hall, determined to get as far away as possible. But Ethan's voice seemed to follow her, taunting. Ugly, pathetic, damaged. Natalie burst through the door of the small, dingy apartment she shared with her mother, choking back sobs. She collapsed on the threadbare couch, hugging a cushion to her chest. Ellen Johnson emerged from the kitchen, a dish towel slung over her shoulder, and a concerned expression on her careworn face. "Natalie, honey, what's wrong?" Between hiccuping breaths, it all spilled out. Her ridiculous schoolgirl crush on Ethan, overhearing his malicious scheme, the soul-crushing realization that she truly was as pathetic as he said. "Oh, baby," Ellen sighed, perching on the couch and pulling her daughter into a tight hug. "I'm so sorry. Men like that, they're weak, cruel. They'll use a good woman up and toss her away like garbage." She smoothed Natalie's hair back from her tear-stained face, a fierceness glinting in her eyes. "But you listen to me, Natalie Rose Johnson. You are not weak. You are not pathetic or ugly or damaged. You're a survivor. You're my beautiful baby girl, and no spoiled rich brat is going to take that from you. You hear?" Natalie looked up at her mother quizzically as Ellen rose and hurried to the bedroom. After several minutes of determined rummaging, she emerged holding a small metal lockbox. "I've been putting aside a little money here and there for years, for a rainy day or to give you a head start in life," Ellen explained, working the combination lock. "I think this qualifies as a downpour, don't you?" She pressed a wad of bills into Natalie's hand. It wasn't a fortune by any means, but it was more cash than Natalie had ever held at once. "Now you are going to march into town, get yourself dolled up at that little salon on Main Street, buy a dress that'll knock 'em dead, and you are going to walk into that gala tonight with your head held high," Ellen commanded. "Show that smarmy doctor and everyone else that Natalie Rose Johnson is nobody's charity case." The staff milled around anxiously on the restaurant's porch, waiting for the spectacle to begin. Most had never laid eyes on the dowdy little morgue mouse, but word of Ethan Callahan's goodwill gesture had spread like wildfire. "This is going to be fun," the guests giggled. "I bet she'll show up in an old-fashioned floral dress and orthopedic shoes," someone shouted from the crowd. Ethan strutted around the porch, soaking in the attention with a smug grin. This was perfect. Not only would he get praised for his magnanimity in taking pity on a charity case, but it would solidify his position as top dog at the hospital. Dating Lila may have bought influence with the higher-ups, but making a pathetic nobody's dream come true? That demonstrated real power. As a sleek black town car pulled up to the curb, excited murmuring rippled through the crowd. This was it. Ethan smoothed his lapels and prepared to condescendingly welcome poor frumpy Natalie. But the woman who stepped out was anything but frumpy. A vision in a sleek champagne-colored sheath that hugged her lush curves, hair in a sophisticated chignon. She glided up the walkway like a movie star gracing the red carpet. Ethan's jaw dropped as she drew closer, and he realized it was Natalie, but not the Natalie he knew. This creature was polished and poised and breathtaking. She held her head high as the crowd fell into a stunned silence. "Hello, Ethan," she purred as she reached him, ruby lips curving into a sphinx-like smile. "Thank you so much for inviting me to this lovely event, although I must admit your intentions were a bit transparent." Ethan sputtered, trying to regain his footing. "Natalie, that dress. You mean you're surprised the ugly little morgue mouse cleans up so well?" She finished archly. "Yes, I suppose you would be. After all, you've barely glanced my way since we were neighbors all those years ago." She leaned in conspiratorially. "I had quite the crush on you back then, you know. Funny how things change, shall we?" With that, she breezed past him into the restaurant, leaving him to scurry after her like a chastened puppy. Shell-shocked whispers and titters erupted behind them. This was not going according to plan, not at all. Through the first few courses, Natalie sparkled, effortlessly charming Ethan's colleagues with witty remarks and warm smiles, leaving him tongue-tied and off balance. She pointedly ignored his clumsy attempts to regain control of the situation, directing her attention everywhere but at him. As the band struck up a sultry Latin number, the dashing Dr. Suarez materialized at Natalie's elbow, offering his hand with a gallant bow. "May I have the pleasure of this dance, Natalie?" She graced him with a dazzling smile. "Why, I'd be delighted, Raphael." As he led her to the dance floor, she tossed a cool glance over her shoulder at Ethan. "You don't mind, do you? I'm sure you want to mingle with your guests." Ethan could only watch helplessly as Natalie moved sinuously in Raphael's arms, their bodies almost indecently close. A muscle ticked in his clenched jaw as Raphael's hand drifted lower on her back. This was a disaster. Not only was he failing to put Natalie in her place, but she was making him look like a fool in front of everyone. When the dance ended and another man instantly claimed Natalie for the next number, something in Ethan snapped. He barged onto the dance floor, forcibly inserting himself between them. "I'm cutting in," he growled. Natalie raised a sardonic brow but allowed herself to be drawn into his arms. They swayed stiffly for a few moments before Ethan bit out, "What the hell are you playing at?" She gave him a look of wide-eyed innocence. "Why, I'm sure I don't know what you mean, Ethan. I'm simply enjoying myself at the party my date so graciously invited me to." Date. He had called himself her date, hadn't he? But not like this. The plan had been for her to embarrass herself, not for every man in the room to look at her like she was a juicy steak and they were starving dogs. "You're making a spectacle of yourself," he hissed. "Oh, and here I thought I was saving you from making a spectacular ass of yourself by trying to humiliate me," she cooed with false sweetness. "Did you really think I wouldn't find out about your nasty little scheme?" Ethan paled. She knew. Of course she knew. And now she was determined to punish him. The music ended and Natalie stepped back, smoothing her dress. "If you'll excuse me, I need to powder my nose. I'm sure I'll have no trouble finding another gallant escort back to the table." With that parting shot, she sashayed away, leaving Ethan fuming impotently on the dance floor. The rest of the evening passed in a similar fashion, with Natalie as the glittering belle of the ball and Ethan stewing miserably on the sidelines. He'd lost count of the dances she'd shared with other men, each one stoking his ire higher. As the event finally wound down, he managed to corner her on the porch. "Natalie, wait, I'm sorry. I've behaved abominably. Let me make it up to you. Come home with me tonight. Give me a chance to show you the man I really am." Natalie looked at him, really looked at him, her gaze penetrating and merciless. This wasn't the shy, infatuated girl he'd so callously planned to manipulate. This was a woman who saw through all his pretenses. "Oh, Ethan," she sighed, "the man you really are is what got us here in the first place. Egotistical, cruel, willing to use people for your own gain. I wanted so badly to believe there was more to you than that. I built up a fantasy in my head of who you could be. But that's all it was, a fantasy." Ethan's guests had begun to filter out onto the porch, curious about the confrontation unfolding. Natalie smiled at them sadly. "I want to thank you all for a delightful evening. And Ethan, I must thank you too, for giving me this beautiful dress, this magical night, but most of all, for curing me of the childish infatuation I've clung to for so long. I see now that you're not the hero I tried to make you out to be. You're just a small, insecure man who tears others down to build himself up." With that, she turned and glided down the walkway to the waiting car. The crowd parted to let her pass, awed by her dignified bearing. Ethan started to go after her, but a hand on his arm stopped him. It was Dr. Suarez, shaking his head with something like pity in his eyes. "Let her go, man. You've done enough." Ethan could only watch dumbly as the car pulled away, taking Natalie and the tattered remnants of his pride with it. He was left standing alone, burning with humiliation, as his guests eyed him with contempt and disdain, and not a single person stepped forward to offer him comfort. The mouse had roared, and the cat had been declawed in front of everyone. Ethan had a feeling the fallout from tonight was only beginning. Numbly, he turned and slunk back into the dying party, his supposed triumph turned to ashes in his mouth.